Okay, so today we're looking at something I think pretty amazing. It's the trees that lived through the atomic bomb in Hiroshima.
Yeah,
I was looking over the excerpts you sent from survivors, the A-bomb trees of Hiroshima.
right.
And it really struck me, we often focus on the devastation, but these trees, uh, it's more than just that. It's about them coming back to life
It's true.
and this whole other story of resilience they tell just by still being there.
Yeah, it's really incredible, isn't it? Even after something as horrific as that bomb, nature finds a way to, I don't know, to come back
Yeah.
and not just come back, but give us this way to understand history through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through the natural world and what it went through.
Totally. And this book doesn't just talk about the trees themselves, does it? It's like it brings in what survivors said, what they lived through alongside this botanical side.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we get a fuller picture, not just the trees, but the people too.
It's like recognizing that the A-bomb wasn't just about, physically rebuilding the city,
Yeah.
but the people's spirit, how that's affected, how that comes back, and how nature does the same.
Like if you think about the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park now, all that green space, it's hard to picture what it was like right after.
Oh yeah, utter devastation. It was just completely wiped out. But even then, under all that,
Yeah.
the book talks about how life was hanging on.
Right.
Just like the people would eventually rebuild their lives, nature was going to reclaim that space.
There's this part from Tamiki Hara. He was a poet and a survivor, and he writes about how the city was eerily quiet after the bomb. Like even the air felt wrong.
I read that.
It's almost like even nature was stunned, in shock.
Oh, totally. And what Hara's saying really captures that. Imagine everything you know gone just like that. It makes sense that people were disoriented.
Yeah.
They had to grapple with that scale of destruction. It was everywhere. It got into everything.
It makes you think about the scars you can't see, on the survivors, on the land itself.
Exactly. And that's what makes these trees so powerful. They're not just survivors. They represent that resilience, that ability to bounce back. They're like a living, breathing example of how the city went from destruction to being reborn.
And it's wild, the kinds of trees that made it. You'd think it'd be the really tough, strong ones, but there's delicate cherry blossoms, even a willow bent almost totally in half that's still going.
Oh, you're talking about the one by the Suramibashi Bridge, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Willows, they're incredibly adaptable, even when they're damaged badly. Their branches can sprout new roots really easily so they can be bent, even broken, and still find a way to grow.
So it's almost like that willow, by being bent but not broken, it's like the spirit of Hiroshima itself.
Exactly. It's a powerful image. And what it tells us is that a lot of times resilience is about being able to adapt, to bend when something tries to break you.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible that just one tree can hold that much of the story.
Oh, and that's just one example. This book goes into dozens of trees, each one with its own story of how it survived. They all show a different part of how Hiroshima recovered.
Right.
There are campfuls that use their leaves, which are full of water, to protect temples from those firestorms. Ginkgos, which have always been a symbol of strength, standing strong in all that devastation.
And those cherry blossoms, right, they're so delicate, but they still came back every spring. It's hard to imagine something so fragile surviving.
Like a perfect image of the cycle of life, death and then renewal. Cherry trees are interesting. They can actually sprout new growth even from wood that seems dead.
Mm.
So after the blast, a lot of them looked done for, totally charred, no leaves. But under that, there were these dormant buds just waiting.
Wow. So when you see those cherry blossoms now, all that pink and white every spring, it's more than just pretty. It's like a statement, right?
Yeah, it's like they're saying, we're still here.
Yeah.
No matter how bad things get, there's that potential for things to start over. Like Hiroshima rebuilding itself,
Mm.
wanting peace, wanting a future. The trees did the same thing in their own way.
It makes you see how connected those two stories are, the people and the
Yeah.
trees both fighting to come back. And it wasn't just chance that the trees survived, was it? Didn't the book talk about people actually helping them?
Absolutely. Survivors talks about these, like, I don't know, they were like tree experts and just regular people who were dedicated to saving them.
Hmm.
They came up with new ways to graft, to help the roots that were damaged, even dug some up and moved them to places where they'd be more protected.
It's like they weren't just taking care of trees, they were taking care of the city's spirit, like trying to heal that too.
Exactly. Every time they took care of a tree, it was like saying they believed in the future, that there was still hope, even after all that. And it wasn't just about the past, but about making the future different.
Like those second-generation Chinese parasols, I think it was,
Yeah.
grown from the seeds of a tree that was right there near ground zero.
Yeah.
Powerful how those trees are connecting different generations.
It's a direct link to that day, to what happened. The original tree, it was the old telecommunications office. That tree saw everything. And now its kids are growing up in schoolyards all over Hiroshima. They're like a reminder of what happened, but also that the city came back and that it wants peace.
Speaking of reminders, there's that part in A-Bomb Reminiscences where Tamiki Hara talks about packing a survival bag really carefully, said his wife had taught him to always be ready.
Yeah.
It's such a normal thing next to everything else that was going on.
Right. But that's what makes it so powerful. It reminds us this wasn't just some event in a history book. These were real people doing everyday things, making plans with no clue what was coming.
He even packed oatmeal, and later he shared it with his family. His brother said, "I had no idea anything could taste so good. It's almost hard to imagine."
It puts in perspective, right? In the middle of all that loss, those little bits of being human, of finding comfort in simple things, they meant everything. It's like this basic need we have to connect, to feel safe, to find some kind of normal, even when everything's gone crazy.
Like those little acts of kindness stand out even more when everything's so dark around them. And Hara, he doesn't try to avoid the hard stuff either, does he? He talks about this feeling of unease, this burden that stuck with him.
Yeah, what he's describing is the mental and emotional toll it took on people, how heavy it was. Imagine knowing what humans are capable of doing to each other, that kind of destruction, and it happened to your city. It's a lot to carry, all those memories, and realizing how fragile peace really is. A lot of survivors felt that weight.
But that burden, it wasn't just something he carried around, was it? It kind of pushed him to do something about it.
Absolutely. Hara got it, that peace isn't some given thing. It doesn't just happen. It's a choice. You have to make it happen. We all do, together.
Right.
And that means always being aware, trying to understand each other, having empathy. And for him, it started with each person making that choice.
Like he said, the desire to prevent it happening again is already a new kind of burden.
It's kind of a lot to think about, but at the same time, doesn't it make you feel like you can actually do something?
I think so, yeah. It means that each of us can play a part in making a more peaceful future. And the trees, they're a powerful symbol of that. Even though they can't speak, they show us that it's possible.
The book mentions that they even moved some trees after the bombing, like this Japanese black pine. It was at Maria Nursery School, closer to where the bomb hit. And now it's at Senda Elementary. It's like the tree's story is still going on, but in a new place. It shows how much the people of Hiroshima value those trees. They're more than just plants. They're living reminders of what happened. And when they rebuilt the city, they made sure to include the trees.
It's like by moving them, they weren't just moving trees, they were moving those stories, those messages of hope to kids who weren't even born when it happened.
That's it exactly. And Senda Elementary is really something. The book talks about how it's got all these different kinds of A-bomb trees, camphors, junipers, ginkgos, wisterias, even one of those second-generation Chinese parasols. It's like a living, breathing example of how life survived and came back even stronger.
It's hard to even imagine the scale of it all. But Survivors doesn't want us to just read about it, right? It wants us to go to Hiroshima, to walk under those trees, to really feel their presence.
There's a difference between knowing something in your head and really feeling it deep down. When you're standing in the shadow of those trees, you're not just learning about history. You're part of something much bigger, something that's still going on.
It's like you're connecting with everyone who was there, who went through that, and who decided to rebuild, to have hope, to say never again to something like that.
It makes you realize what really matters, right? It reminds you that even when things seem their darkest, people, like those trees, can be amazingly strong. We can recover, we can grow, we can choose hope.
So when you're looking at these trees, thinking about their story, think about what it means for all of us, how destruction and rebuilding go hand in hand, and how each of us can help build a future where things like this don't happen anymore.